Yeah, it was a unique upbringing, and it's weird because now since I put this record out, I was trying to get on the Joe Rogan show, and I know he likes lifting and stuff, and so I put this little tape together for the publicist, and I started researching to see if there was anybody in modern day who pushed more weight than me, and I started looking up all the kids' records, and still to this day, I can't find anybody who's even in the same universe with me. So on this one tape I have, and I'm glad my father finally filmed it because if I didn't have this tape, no one would believe this. But I'm 8 years old. It's 1985, and I'm maxing out on squat, bench, and deadlift. We would do that about twice a year in between playing sports. And when you're a little kid or any time when you're maxing out, you're only making 5, 10 pound gains, every 6 months because you're pushing to the extreme. But I'm 8 years old. I weigh about 60 pounds. I squat 255. I deadlift 235 and bench 130. And what I found in the archives from records of 2023 are kids, the weight that they are pushing was I'm pushing more weight than them in my warm-up sets. And it's
Wow.
it's strange to look back and watch myself on video like that because for me it felt normal then, but watching it back now it seems totally abnormal when you're hanging out with an 8-year-old and you realize like putting 250 pounds on any 8-year-old's back seems impossible. But it was just something we started as a very young age. I threw a baseball across the infield when I was 5. I had never played catch with my father, and it looked like a 12-year-old had been playing for a few years. And so he just thought, let me put him in the weight room and at least get him a free education in college. And him and his friends had already had this from the 1970s, this crew of guys who were powerlifting, and they were squat, bench, and deadlift. And they were, these guys were pushing, 700 pound squats, and same thing with the deadlift and benching in the mid 400s. And so it felt natural to us, but looking back on it on video, it's very odd.
Did you think you were going to be a professional power lifter and not a Major League Baseball player?
No, it was always tailored for the baseball. My father was not a baseball guy, even though he was born in Cuba. But he just knew that if I was a little stronger, it was probably going to give me the ability to be a better athlete. And this was in a time, when parents were constantly telling my father that you're going to stunt his growth and, what are you doing? And he just was a little bit ahead of the curve. He was taking me to get massages when I was a young kid. I was going to the chiropractor. There was things that he was already mixing in that made sense to him just from kind of like a 2 and 2 equals 4 mentality. And as I got into minor league baseball, even some of these things were looked at upon as like taboo, and then years later you find that, hey, every major league locker room has a chiropractor. Every major league locker room has guys who are getting IVs, and there's a nap room and all these things. And he just he turned my brain on for strategy in that way, to kind of like pick up all the pieces of the puzzle to build kind of a full career. And it took a long time for the game to actually catch up to that mentality. And nowadays you see that, you ask, why are athletes throwing so much harder now? It's because they're doing all the things that I was doing as a kid, but they have bigger and stronger bodies by birth.
100%. And I couldn't agree with you anymore, because now you see these guys pitching and all of a sudden they're like doing crow hops and throwing the ball as hard as they can into the net. Like, do you see all this stuff these guys are doing now just to get bigger and stronger? And it's like you were kind of like the kickstarter of this whole thing that nobody really even knew about,
Yeah, and it was a bit of a confidence thing for me. I mean, Kurt Schilling told me in 2004 when he didn't really know me in spring training. He said I was too thin to throw 230 innings, and 06 I throw 240 innings, and part of my ego, or really all of my ego in the game, lied in throwing in 200 innings and finding a way to stay healthy. But people didn't know what I had been doing for my whole childhood when other kids were just out playing and they were throwing on their uniform last minute to go to the ballpark. I was carbo loading a couple nights before. I was taking supplements. I was living a lifestyle of a Major League Baseball player because of what we were doing in the weight room. And, other people weren't privy to that. And so it not only made me physically strong, but it made me mentally strong to deal with the grind of 162 games in spring training and everything that comes along with the dog days of summer. And if you look at the second halves of a lot of my seasons, in August and September, I would have really good numbers most of the time because I wasn't mentally burned out like a lot of guys would be early on in their career, like a Johnny Cueto, who was thinking, man, I just can't wait to get back to the Dominican and have a beer on the beach. I was thinking, I'm going to win 4 more games here in the back half of the season.
Now, was it mostly lower body? Because you're not, Mark McGwire, Jose Canseco here with
Right.
the upper body. And also, I would guess for years that was not the move for you anyway, because you want to maintain your flexibility with your upper half, right?
Yeah, I was just I was fortunate that I'm kind of a long, lanky guy who's just loose by nature. So, that one part of it was that I really wasn't going to have a body. I'm 6'4", 152 when I graduated high school. So there was no way to really blow that body up unless you were going to eat twice as many calories and be in the gym 3 times a day, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger. And we weren't lifting that way. We were lifting low reps, heavy weight. So we would never be doing more than sixes. So there was never a time when I was doing 10s and 12s and 15s on squats or even bench. So because you were doing a small amount of reps, you weren't getting that huge swell. You weren't getting that real blood-filled pump that you want when you're going to the beach and you look good. You were just feeling really strong. And so I had this tiny, skinny little body. I was always the skinniest guy on the team. But underneath it, I was housing this type of strength that was extraordinary. I can remember being like in 7th grade and talking or doing something, in PE and having a coach say, "Hey man, give me 25 push-ups," like it was like like a real harsh thing he was putting on me. And I did those 25 push-ups, and I could see the look on his face was like, what was that? Because back then I could do 25 push-ups almost like I was just doing them in the air. I weighed 55, 60 pounds, maybe 70 pounds, and to push, that body weight was very, very easily. And so it was something that we were working on just to be strong. And my father just deduced that should help me in some way down the line.